There is a place that is spoken about only in whispers, a dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends, a place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day, it hides just outside of view, but when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night, roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. I love the community that we've created with our listeners across the globe. I've had a chance to meet and greet with many of you from Australia to Germany to Prague and Scotland, Ireland, Romania, listeners literally around the world who've become friends. And I love when our friends reach out and they say, you've got to look into this guest. And that's what happened with today's guest. Our friend Nika from Germany, believe it or not, all the way in Germany, had to alert me about our guest, who is right over in Chicago, just about a 6-hour drive from me, an hour flight, and she brought this to my attention. I was astounded as I watched this story unfold. She did a recent interview with Megyn Kelly on the Today Show. And I tuned in to check her out on another radio show this afternoon, and I knew we had to bring her on to share this story. We've done quite a few stories over the years regarding life after death, near-death experiences, and strange scenarios like this. But I promise you, today's show will be nothing like anything you've heard before. And this is a powerful story with many layers, and I want to jump right into it and get going. Stephanie Arnold is the mom that predicted her own death and then survived to talk about it. Pregnant with her second child, Stephanie began receiving mysterious but strong premonitions that she was going to die during the delivery. She was distressed. She did everything she could to inform the medical teams, her family, and everybody about what was coming, but no one would believe her. But Stephanie knew they were wrong. She's here tonight to talk to us about her very interesting story. Stephanie was a TV producer who spent 27 years creating and directing TV shows, music videos, and documentaries. She left the business in 2008 after meeting the love of her life, and from that point on, the only thing she wanted to produce was a family. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, and I apologize, as I've been telling our listeners this week, I'm battling this brutal cold and cough, so from time to time my microphone might just cut out on you, and I apologize. I'd rather do that than blow everybody's eardrums out with my hacking. This is an amazing tale. So you started getting these kind of precognitive visions, if you will. Let's go back in your life. Was this something that had happened to you growing up as well, from an early age?
Yes, so it's actually a great question because I would say since the age of 10, 11 years old, I was somewhat intuitive. I would see things. They were pretty serious things. I would see a relative getting sick and they were perfectly healthy, and I would just know it would be the last time I would see them, and 2 days later they were dead. And
holy cow. How old were you at that age?
I was 10 years old. So at 10 years old, I didn't really have somebody to talk about these feelings. All I knew is when it happened the second time, I just felt like I was willing it to happen. So ultimately I compartmentalized it and never wanted to see or feel anything like that remotely again.
So you began to internalize and feel as though because you were seeing these things, you were making them happen.
Absolutely. And it came full circle, during my story when I was recovering, when a doctor said something similar to me. So I'll get into that much later. But
look at you. What a tease. You've done this before, I can tell.
Well, teases for TV. It's easier when you are not the story, right?
Right. So you had these issues growing up where you would kind of, would you say these are visions? Would they come to you in a dream? How would you experience them?
I would experience them viscerally. So I would feel, I guess what some people would understand as a medical intuitive, I wouldn't have a name for it, but I would feel things off of people. Since I was a very young kid, I used to do acupressure on people, like intuitively know where their headache resonated from and how to fix it by putting pressure on certain key points. And I was doing that since I was 4 or 5 years old. So I didn't know that that was anything other than the fact, I had a little trick up my sleeve to fix somebody's headache. As I got older, I would just feel things off of people. Even in high school, I just knew somebody was abused or knew something about somebody that they didn't tell me, but it was just a feeling I had that I would feel resonating or buzzing inside certain parts of my body. But again, it was a fearful feeling. I trepidated a lot. I was confused by them. I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I thought I was going crazy. So instead of being the crazy odd girl out in high school or the person that was the freak, I just shut it down.
Now, as an adult, did you ever talk to your family members about that ability? And did you find out if anybody else had that kind of issue in your family lineage?
It's a great question. So my grandmother, my father's mother, lived in Cuba. And so she was santera, which is, somebody who had visions. She definitely had extrasensory perception about things. My father and my aunt and my uncle were very scientifically oriented. So they, my father was a lawyer, my uncle was a doctor, my aunt was a businesswoman. So even though they might say, abuela has this, I don't know how much it would resonate with them. My father always thought that it was a little crazy.
But he didn't dismiss it completely. He just wasn't having the experiences himself.
That is correct. I think their analytical mind was more of like, I don't know how she knows some things, but maybe she's just trying to scare us.
How old were you? Yeah, how old were you when you found out that was part of your family heritage?
Probably during this whole adventure, or catastrophe, because when I would delve deeper with my father about after this whole thing happened, he's like, Grandma used to tell me this and that, but I never really believed her, but your gift is much stronger than hers. I said, maybe you just didn't believe it. But for me, understanding that had I understood it at a much earlier age, I would have had somebody to talk to about it and been less fearful of it.
Being somebody involved in TV production for 27 years, all of the people you met and came into contact with, you had to be overwhelmed with emotions as you're picking up on kind of the resonance of people that you're around. Was it overwhelming for you?
No, because like I said, when I was younger, I ended up compartmentalizing it. So when I think I don't know whether it's like riding a bicycle, because all of the experiences I'm having, I equate it to, as a kid, I was on low voltage. Then I go asystolic, which I flatline. I have no electricity running through my body. And then later, now I'm on high voltage. So I feel things. So I can't be in a crowd like I used to. When I was younger, when I was producing, as you're running gun and you're in a crowd and you're doing things. I mean, I was executive producing Deal or No Deal, in Spanish and running with like a chicken with my head cut off. And I was doing the Puerto Rican Day Parade and, working in New York. And I don't think I gave it, I didn't protect myself, but at the same time, I think it was compartmentalized so deep that enough callus had been built over it that I wasn't connecting with that side of me, which is probably good and made it easier as far as being around people and socializing.
Now, Stephanie has written a book called 37 Seconds, which is a national bestseller. It's a #1 Amazon bestseller, a Library Journal bestseller. She has received over 6 awards for this book. And that's why she's visiting with us tonight to share this unique story. And the book originally came out, in 2015?
It did.
But you've updated your story. You've done quite a bit since, and we're going to get into that. But that's what I found so intriguing about this, is that you didn't just accept at face value what occurred and happened in your life. You've been kind of on this journey ever since.
I have.
Great.
I have.
Well, let's start to deal this back, because as we said, you've got this ability. You kind of compartmentalize it and shut it down as best you can. Were there still bleed throughs from time to time growing up? Did you know something bad was coming? Did you still get some of those flashes?
You know, it's interesting. There were moments in my life that I talk about, or that I've written about, that, for instance, I was producing Jewish educational documentaries, and I worked for Lubavitch at one time, which was this Orthodox sect of Judaism. And the Rebbe, who was alive in 1991 when I was doing a documentary about him, he said to me, apropos of nothing, he handed me $1 and said, you'll have children, but you'll have difficulty having them. And, you know, people looked at him that he was a very spiritual person. You felt his omnipotence, his presence was just all powerful when you walked into a room. But I didn't give it that much credence, other than the fact that he's an incredible human being, right? That was it. And then but I was curious. And then I had seen a Turkish coffee reader who read which I don't know if you know what it is, but when you drink the Turkish coffee, which tastes like mud. I don't drink coffee that often.
And you're making it sound so appealing. I think I might not try it either.
No, but you know what? It's pretty fascinating. And for all the Turkish coffee lovers out there, I don't mean disrespect, but I was 19 years old and I didn't drink a cup of coffee, and they want you to drink this coffee, which is thick. And you turn the cup upside down and it reads the stains on the coffee cup. And when they turned the cup upside down and she read the stain, she's like, oh, you'll die at an early age. And
what?
You know, yeah.
She was just that matter of fact. Oh, you're going to die at an early age?
Yeah, it was lovely. Lovely. So I'm there with my friend. I'm in college, and I'm like, this was the first time I had gone to any kind of psychic reader and everything. I'm like, well, this is no fun. I'm out of here, right? And the Rebbe, when he said that to me, I was 20 years old, and they give you $1, or he gives you $1 in order to give you this blessing. And I'm like, I didn't look at it as a blessing. I spent $1 on a Coke. I had no desire to get married or have children. So the idea that he was giving me any kind of prophecy, I was like, I didn't care. So at that point, I was just curious how people saw things. So you're asking about the bleed through. I felt this vibration, but I really stayed busy. And when I look back at my life, I realize I stayed busy for a reason, in order to not feel a lot of it, because obviously it was painful going back to childhood.
All right. Were you only given images of kind of the negative things, or were you ever, and I know you'd shut most of it off, but you have to have some recollection of it at this point. Were there ever any positives that you knew was, you knew the boy was going to ask you to prom, or, you knew something good was coming?
I knew jobs were coming. I knew a move was coming. I knew there were certain things, but most of it has been about health and medical issues. So that has been a constant. So it's always been like a warning of, a sense of this is coming, just pay attention to it. And not just from me.
I would guess that would have to be quite overwhelming, but that's kind of an intuitive nature. But, there's definitely something to women's intuition. Mm-hmm. It's not just an old wives' tale or a slant, that a lot of people, that's just women's intuition. There is really something there. And why do you think women do seem to have a better grasp of that ability than most men do?
I think you could ask your wife this question, and, many wives that I talk to, or many women that I talk to versus men, is that the logical side of men takes over, and they process it in a way of, all right, well, let me get to point A, to point B, to point C, to point D, where women are feeling things on an emotional level, on a deeper level, on a spiritual level. And when they look at a person that shakes their hand, they're feeling something versus, hey, I just shook this guy's hand. You meet somebody, my husband will always now, when he meets somebody, he'll be like, oh, I thought the guy was nice. And I'm like, no, there's something right underneath there. there's something wrong with this person. And he'd be like, how do you know? And sure enough, like 3 months down the road, it would come out. And I said, I couldn't put my finger on it, but there's something brewing under there. And I just think that women sense things on a 10-layer deep, whereas men just look at it on a 2-layer deep.
See, that's interesting. My wife would tell you I'm completely illogical, so that shouldn't that should work in my favor, I would think. That's great. So you've got this pretty astounding ability to be open to these senses and know that there's all of this going on. But you just told me an interesting aspect of your story that I want to get into deeper as we continue to progress. But let's now kind of fast forward to this pregnancy. You had one pregnancy, everything was fine. There was no issues, any medical issues at all during that?
No, in fact, I went 41 weeks, gave birth, and was back at work 8 days later. So the only issue I had was she was too big, and I had to have a C-section. But it wasn't anything traumatic other than the fact that I was having a baby. That was it.
All right. Now, for the men in the audience, and for perhaps the women who have never had a C-section.
Yes.
When you have a second child, is the old wives' tale, or is it an old wives' tale, or is it true that if you have a second child, it's also going to come C-section?
No, it's not necessarily true. I mean, there are plenty of women that decide to have it naturally, have the baby naturally, and it is possible to have the baby naturally. It's certainly a possibility. So it doesn't have to be guaranteed that just because you have a C-section, the second one will come out that way.
All right. Now, once you've had a C-section, are you predisposed to any kind of future issues with pregnancy that you were aware of?
You know, they increase risk for bleeding. There's an increased risk for what I ended up having, which was a placenta previa, which is this cervix, the placenta growing a little too close to the cervix. Because of the scar tissue, the placenta can hang and go towards the scar. And so there's certain things that you definitely are at an increase for after having a C-section, sure.
But that's not anything radical. It's not like, by having this, you've got a 20% chance of miscarriage or anything like that.
No, okay. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, a placenta previa is a 1 in 200 risk. So, it's quite common and people have no issue. Placenta previa can move out of the way, can move on top of it, could give a little complication. But one of the worst complications you can have from it is basically having a C-section. So I was prepared ultimately when I was diagnosed with one. So regarding the second pregnancy, want to get right into it, or?
Well, right. Okay. Well, and the reason I was asking those questions, I just wanted to kind of set the hook so that people didn't think you were already going into this predisposed, worrisome, or fearful that, because of your first child going long and having a C-section, that you were automatically at any kind of really heightened risk.
Right. And just for everybody to know, I mean, when you're given a C-section, your spouse is there, they put a curtain in front of your face so you don't see any cutting or, you're numb if you want to be. So it's not, it's as uncomplicated when the pregnancy is uncomplicated. That the only complication is that they cut you. But, ultimately they can give you a tummy tuck at the same time. So there you go.
Stephanie Arnold, our guest, she is the author of the book 37 Seconds. And we're now at the point where you're pregnant for the second time. Early in this pregnancy, are there any warning signs that you have any medical maladies or conditions that are beginning?
No. In fact, the first 20 weeks was really easy. I had acid reflux and Charlie horses with my first one, which wasn't a complication. It was just annoying and realizing that pregnancy is not easy on your body.
Right.
But I didn't have that with my son. So when I was pregnant the second time, I had no Charlie horses. I had no acid reflux. I'm like, I can get pregnant with boys all the time. This is not an issue. And at the time, we were splitting our time between New York and Chicago. My husband had taken a job as the chief economist for the New York Attorney General's office. So we were in New York, and I was had two doctors. I was traveling back and forth, so I had a doctor at NYU, and then I had a doctor at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And at the 20-week ultrasound, they had noticed that I had a placenta previa. And like I said, 1 in 200 risk, not a big, huge issue. But I was told by my doctor at that moment that do not exercise, do not exercise, do not carry anything, do not jump around, what have you. And I was like, all right, well, maybe this is...
Wait, did they need to tell a pregnant woman not to jump around and act goofy anyway? I mean, how many women...
I think when you're living in New York City, I mean, you're walking a lot and you have a stroller with another child. So how are you going to tell a pregnant woman that's like, okay, don't carry anything? But that's not what hit me the wrong way. Like, something happened when they said you have a placenta previa, and then he walked out of the room. And I looked at my husband, who is a very logical human being. He is, a PhD economist from University of Chicago. He is, in his way of thinking, very linear, very analytical, very much a data-driven person. And I said to him, I don't know what this placenta previa thing is, but I'm O negative, which is a rare blood type. I'm already special in one category. I don't know what this is, but I've got a bad feeling about it. And my husband, like any rational human being in that moment, would say, sweetheart, we don't have enough information. Let's just take it easy and let's learn more information. And then if we need to freak out, we'll freak out. But for right now, let's take it one day at a time. I heard him, but I really didn't hear him. So right. I went home and I started Googling what a placenta previa is. And at that moment, I saw that a placenta previa, again, is not a huge ordeal, but it can turn into an accreta, which is what Kim Kardashian had, which is when the placenta merges with the uterus. And if that happens, then the potential risk for needing a hysterectomy, hemorrhaging, and baby and mother mortality is at a higher risk. And ultimately, the worst case scenario is you could die from it. And I sat back and I took a deep breath. And I said to my husband, the baby's going to be fine, but this is exactly what's going to happen to me.
So you knew that moment this just unfolded for you. So you weren't getting these little snippets slowly. Did it just come like a waterfall? You knew everything all at once?
When I read those lines in that moment, it hit me like an arrow straight, like a dagger straight on target. However, I'm so bad at analogies. My husband laughs at me, but that like the arrow straight to your heart, like a bullseye.
Sure.
That's what it was. And then the visions started. So if I were to ask
your husband right now,
yes,
if I were to get him on the phone and say, listen, I'll never tell her. You just tell me. Is she kind of neurotic? Does she always think she's going to get the worst case scenario? What would his honest answer be?
Lucky for me, this doctor that I had in Chicago had delivered my first child. And too many people in the industry have known me as a non-histrionic, non-neurotic person, because you cannot be when you have a crew of 150 people or you're doing live television. You have to have your level-headed persona straight on. And no, I was not. No, he would tell you that this is unusual for her. He would be politically correct, but because he wouldn't want to get divorced. But he would say to you that this is unusual for her, and he, maybe because he was just trying to figure it all out with himself, with the situation, he went with me to every single doctor's appointment and heard me saying the same thing over and over again. He ultimately felt that there was something wrong with the baby because he had never seen me this way.
See, because if I was you, I know I don't read WebMD. I don't go look online doctor stuff because I'm pretty sure with my current cold, I would convince myself I've got floating terminal cancer that's just shifting from organ to body part, because that's what I would read into it on the internet. But you read what's going to happen and you kind of go to this worst case scenario, but there was really no consoling you, right? There was no trying to convince you otherwise. You knew this was your fate.
Yeah, I can only compare it to, what people feel, whether they want to call it maternal instinct or gut instinct or however it is that you as an individual who's listening to the story can take it upon themselves to try and put yourself in my shoes. If you're walking down a street that you always walk down, and for whatever reason at that particular moment you decide, you know what, I get a bad feeling about this street, I'm going to walk around the block instead of going down the street. You might never know what happened, but for whatever reason you went another way. That's the kind of feeling, that sinking feeling of like, I know what's about to happen. And it was so strong that I went out of my way to quote unquote produce the life-saving measures to save my life.
All right. I please forgive my ignorance on this. We've all heard of postpartum depression, right? And that can be devastating and brutal and rear its ugly head in bizarre ways after the baby is born. Is there anything like a pre-partum depression where, doctors might have looked at you and thought, the hormones are kind of out of it. She just read this dark possibility. This is really kind of taking hold of her that way. Or is that, is there no prepartum depression?
No, not that I'm aware of. The only thing that every single doctor and nurse and clinician told me is that maybe I am stressed. Maybe I need to relax. Maybe I need to get some more rest. So that was the only thing that was the common conversation I would be having. Because what I ended up doing was after the first vision, the clear vision, I told every single person I saw what was going to happen to me. Not only did I tell all my doctors, and every time I had an ultrasound, I said, so what happens, if the placenta turns into an accreta and I hemorrhage, and what happens if this, and how do I get more blood, and what happens if I need a hysterectomy? I would be talking about it incessantly. It's so much so that when I was walking through the park in Tribeca Park on a winter day, and I was showing my daughter the fountain and talking about how it would flow, I immediately, in my head, the flowing water turned to flowing blood, and I felt it viscerally. I felt the blood flowing in my body, and I lost my balance, and I grabbed the stroller, and I called my husband, and I said, you need to meet me at the hospital. I'm hemorrhaging. And so I'd meet him at the emergency room, and the doctors would be like, is everything okay, Mrs. Arnold? And I said, no, I'm obviously hemorrhaging. And they're like, no, you actually are not. The baby's fine. The amniotic fluid is fine. You're okay. Maybe you need some rest. And, at one point I called a friend of my husband's who...
Wait, 1 second. I'm sorry. So you would be out and you would start to feel you would feel the hemorrhaging. You would feel the bleeding. You would feel it as though it was occurring right now.
Correct. And what I learned later, it was, it wasn't a false alarm to me. It was a warning. It was, if I had gone back to my 10-year-old self, I would have understood it to be a warning. The interesting thing, what I've learned, becoming more intuitive or accepting what I understand as most people have this, right? So this isn't unique to me. It's just I'm now on a heightened awareness than most because of the experience. But what I'm aware of is that most of the time when I get these visions, there's no time, because there's no time and space, right? In this other dimension, these are things I'm just learning just from a physics and energy kind of space. The issue with my situation was I did have an actual time. The time of death was going to be the time I delivered. So I didn't know when that was going to be, but I knew that it was going to be that day. So all of the feelings that I was feeling were warnings for the day of delivery.
And there was, again, no doubt in your mind, you're telling everybody, you've taken it to the extreme. You've told everybody in the medical community, you've told your family, you've told friends, you've told the lady at the McDonald's counter when she asked where's the beef, you told her what's going on, right?
There was one time when I was at Starbucks and this woman who was pregnant, barista who was giving me my coffee or decaf. And so she handed me the coffee and she's like, "Oh, how's your pregnancy going?" And I said, "I'm going to die."
And you must have been a real charmer at parties.
Oh, I was a huge charmer. Nobody wanted to get near me. I mean, everybody, my friends, I didn't tell my father because he had a very weak heart. So at the time, I just was like, "Oh, so what happens if you need a hysterectomy when you give birth?" Like talking to my mom or talking to my sister. But I wasn't being overtly honest with my feelings to my family because I didn't want to scare them. But at one point we had a mutual friend, my husband and I had a friend who's a fellow gyne-onc at University of Chicago. And,
Now for 99% of our listening audience, what is a gyne-onc?
So a gynecological oncologist is somebody who specializes, who specializes in reproductive organ cancer. So they're the ones that have probably they deal with the highest, most complicated cases in reproductive organs surgery, so they have the most experience. And in a typical delivery, your OB, your obstetric gynecologist, would deliver the baby, and then if there was an emergency, they would pass it over to maternal fetal medicine. Well, MFM, maternal fetal medicine, doesn't have as much experience as gyne-onc. So our friend, as I'm talking to him, I tell Jonathan, I'm like, "You need to explain what I'm feeling." And he's like, "Honey, I'm not going to bother the man," and I said, no, give me the phone. So I start talking to him and he's like, "Stephanie, what you're afraid of happening is a half of a percent chance it's going to happen." And I said, "Okay, well, just amuse me. In the event I need an emergency hysterectomy, who do I need to do it?" And so he explains to me that you want gyne-onc to do it. Now, at that time, I had traveled between New York and Chicago a couple of times. I started bleeding a little bit when I was in Chicago, so I got grounded. So I knew I was going to be delivering in Chicago at Northwestern. So try to make an appointment with the head of gyne-onc at Northwestern Memorial Hospital when one does not have reproductive organ cancer and you're a healthy 6.5-month pregnant woman. It is not easy. And at some point, the nurse got fed up with me asking me these questions about who told you, who referred you, why do you need to see a gyne-onc? And I said, "I'll be in there. Just give me the open time." And, Jonathan went with me to the appointment and we're sitting in the waiting room. Finally got the appointment. We're sitting in the waiting room and there are women who are suffering and barely surviving from cancer and they have IVs in their arms and they have no hair and I can't look them in the eye. And Jonathan's like, "I am embarrassed to be here." And I said, "I do not know what to tell you." I said, "But I cannot get anyone to listen to hear what I'm saying. And nor can they say, 'Oh, I had a patient that felt like this before and this is what it was.' Maybe this doctor would have heard something like this and maybe he can give me something to do, something to look up, something to research so I could calm my nerves." So we go into our consultation with the gyne-onc head at the hospital and his resident at the time. And so they're taking notes and the doctor says, "How can I help you, Mrs. Arnold?" And I explain my 6 premonitions, right? I'm going to hemorrhage. I'm going to have an accreta. You're going to need to put me under general anesthesia. I go through all of this. I say, "And I'm going to need a hysterectomy and you're going to be the one to do it." And Jonathan jokes about it. He's like, "You were so mafia-like when you pointed at your finger at him and said, 'I see you, you see me, you are now my doctor.'" And he sits back in his chair and the resident at this point has stopped taking notes, right? And the gyne-onc says, "Mrs. Arnold, have you been on the internet?" And I said,
so he's already starting to think, "Oh, we've got a nut on our hands."
Exactly. "Why, yes, I have, doctor, but this is going to happen to me." He's like, "Okay, Mrs. Arnold." He's like, "Why don't we order an MRI and see if it's positive for an accreta, which is that merger between the placenta and the uterus. If it's positive, then I'll schedule myself for the day of your mandatory C-section and we'll do it then." And I said, "Okay, great." And you know what? I felt better because as I'm walking out the door, I had a homework assignment to do. Maybe the MRI would pick up something and this would give me a psychological reason, like I was having something physiologically happening in my body that was resonating psychologically, and it was effectively creating the craziness in my head. So I do the MRI.
Uh-huh.
And the MRI is negative.
Now, was that a relief to you at all?
No, my husband said the same thing. Good for you, David. So my husband says, you should feel better. And I said, no, actually I feel worse because I'm running out of people to tell my crazy foreboding story to. And so again, I go back to my doctors and I say, I'm still having these visions. And my OB, who's a friend, Julie Levitt, Dr. Julie Levitt, she says to me, she's like, Stephanie, I just feel like I can't calm you down. Why don't you have a consultation with anesthesia? And so I didn't have it with Adina, with my daughter. Okay, fine. I'll talk to anyone, somebody new to talk to. And so I ended up scheduling a phone consultation with a fellow doctor, anesthesiologist, who said her name was Dr. Grace Lim. And she answered the phone and she's explaining to me what will happen during delivery, epidural, where you recover. I said, that's all great. I know all this. I've had a baby before, had a C-section before. What happens in the event? And I go through, again, everything that I described. And she said later that she was startled by how articulate I was about what was going to happen, had sought out specialists to save my life, and had had a baby before. So with that one phone call, unbeknownst to me, she flagged my file and incorporated extra blood in a crash cart.
So she didn't necessarily buy into the fact that what you were saying was going to happen, but she flagged your account and thought, you know what, let's just have something on hand just in case.
She said later she had a sinking feeling. She said she was very unsettled for a long time after that phone call, that she couldn't make me feel comfortable. That she said she will never forget the last thing I said to her after I was done having the conversation, and we spoke for half an hour. And at the end of the conversation, I said to her, it is what it is. And she said those words would haunt her, and why in part she flagged that file. So again, I did not know she did this. So I ultimately took to Facebook and I posted on Facebook, if anybody has my blood type, I'm going to need it. I wrote goodbye letters. I sent out goodbye letters. I told people in the goodbye letters exactly what was going to happen to me. And
all right, well, let me stop you right there. Now, you're aware, and you're telling everybody, I'm going to die. This is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. And I'm going to check out. But the son will be fine.
Always, yes.
All right. You're coming to grips with the fact nobody believes you. There's probably not going to be somebody that's going to step up and save your life. You are convinced that this is the final curtain.
Yes.
Were you coming to peace with that?
No.
All right. And then was there any peace brought to you by the fact that, well, my son's going to survive this? That's important. I'm a very organized, very anal type A person, and I had everything organized for my daughter's birth. And for my son, I didn't buy one stitch of clothing. I didn't organize his bedroom. I didn't have anything prepared for him because something inside of me felt that if I didn't do this, that he would still need me and I would be spared. Interesting. So you were almost using it as a bargaining chip with fate.
Yes.
Hey,
yes.
Listen, I'm not going to do any of this stuff. He needs me. You can't take me. That's right. Fascinating. What a strange twist. 37 Seconds is the name of the book. Again, it's a national bestseller, #1 Amazon bestseller, Library Journal bestseller. It's got over 6 awards. Stephanie Arnold, our guest. We have to take a break. Stay tuned. This fascinating story continues here on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
I told you this was going to be a wild ride. This is probably one of the most interesting stories I've heard in quite a while, and I'm glad that we're able to share it with you. Stephanie Arnold, our guest. Her book is called 37 Seconds. And I know what you're thinking. You'd like to get a copy of it. And where are you going to find it? How could you possibly, in this day and age, find this book available for you? Well, we've made it as easy as we possibly can. Just go to darknessradio.com, click on our Killer Deals link. It'll take you directly into our Amazon page, and we'll have the book featured prominently right there so you don't have to miss it. You can order your copies right now. You need to hear the entire story. Again, we're going to do our best tonight, but there is so much and so many intricacies to this tale that no matter how long we have this lady on the phone, I don't think we would be able to hit every aspect of this story. It's an amazing tale, Stephanie. I thank you for being so open and forward about this and candid. This is astounding. You have had these premonitions that have come to you. Every one of these little aspects. What did you say? There were 6 basic visions or premonitions you were having about how this was going to go down?
Yes. So I always thought the baby was going to be fine.
Right.
I knew they were going to have to put me under general anesthesia. I thought that my placenta previa was going to turn into an accreta. I thought they would need to give me a hysterectomy, that I was going to hemorrhage, and that I would die on the operating table.
So that was your premonitions. You contacted everybody you could, friends, family, and every medical personnel you possibly could. One took you a little bit more seriously than everybody else. The anesthesiologist heard what you said and was left with an uneasy feeling. She ended up flagging your file, and when it came time for you to deliver your son, she had a crash cart brought in and extra blood. And
Correct.
That's a very important aspect to this story. So you are saying your goodbyes. How hard is it to sit there and start to write your goodbye letters to loved ones, friends, and coworkers?
It's incredibly painful because on one hand, I'm trying to absorb the last moments of my life, whatever I'm being given, with my daughter and my stepdaughter, who I love very much. And then the love of my life, I want to absorb moments and watch the smiles and hold him and go for a walk with him. And then at the same time, wonder what this unborn child is going to look like and what he would feel like being held. And it's my first son. And then I am overwhelmed with this huge cloud on top of my head and this ticking time bomb waiting to happen. So I can't enjoy the moments that I have left, and I can't focus on all the things I could possibly say in the world, which I have so much empathy for the people that are given a sentence with all different illnesses, and they know how much time they have left, whatever that is, and to be panicked about, am I getting enough information out and life lessons, and what can I teach my children? It was just an overwhelming amount of emotions going through those every single day, every single second, every single minute of the day.
For our listeners, just imagine you're standing there watching somebody with a large handgun pointed directly between your eyes. You're incapable of getting away. You're incapable of ducking. This gun is pointing at you. You can see the face of the Reaper ready to pull that trigger, and everyone you tell cannot see what is unfolding in front of you. That's exactly what you're dealing with here. You were watching this almost in slow motion, your death coming for you, and there was nothing anybody could do.
Nothing.
Was your husband, now in hindsight, he's able to talk about this, I'm sure, openly and candidly with you about this. Was he worried that you were having a mental breakdown?
Sure. He didn't say it out loud, but what he thought was there was something wrong with the baby, because all of my tests, and I had a lot of tests done that proved that everything that I feared was negative. Other than the placenta previa, everything else was fine. Amniotic fluid was fine. Baby was fine. I was breathing okay. There was no merger with these organs. There was no need for alarm for a hysterectomy. Everything was going swimmingly. So he thought there was something that was undiagnosed with the baby, and that was causing the chaos in my head.
The hormonal issues and
Correct.
the chaos and unbalanced nature. If you pressed him right now, did he believe at any time that you were going to die? Did he ever start to buy into that, or?
No, he will tell you that he never gave in to that until later for a split second. But he said, you had a lot of premonitions that came true, but I could say that you were right on most of them, but you didn't stay dead, so I was right.
But you didn't stay dead.
So I said, all right, I give that to you.
That's charming. Well, you didn't stay dead, so it's you guys have to call it a wash on that one, I guess. All right, so the big day is approaching, and
he's
are you spotting? Are you doing anything, or is there any other kind of medical issues as you're leading up to this birth date?
No, everything was fine. I was scheduled for a 37-week C-section, but at 36 weeks to the day, my husband was in New York and I was in Chicago. And I was there in the house with a friend of mine, and my daughter was there, and my daughter's 19 months at the time, 20 months. And in the middle of giving breakfast, I start bleeding all over the kitchen floor. And this
time it's real. This isn't.
This time it's real.
Okay.
This time I'm cleaning up blood, and I'm trying to distract my daughter when she says, "Mommy, why are you peeing red?" Right. So I am making sure I'm calm, and the maternal instinct kicks in, and I'm like, "Oh, Mommy's fine. We're going to meet your brother today," and just really, really calm. I call my husband and I say, "You need to get to the airport. We're having the baby now." And he says, "How do you know?" I said, "Don't ask me these things. Get on a plane." So I
know our listeners are going to want to know, and I don't want to stall the interview, but did you let on to your daughters, your stepdaughter or your biological daughter at any time that you thought Mommy might not be around?
No, I did not.
Okay, good. I just wanted, we said that you told everybody and anybody that would listen. I just wanted clarification so that they...
No, absolutely. That's a very good point. I didn't want to scare them.
Right.
And I wanted their last memories of me to be smiling and happy. And anytime I cried or I was fearful, I went into another room away from them. So I get my friend was sitting in the driver's seat and put my daughter in the car seat. And I said, "Get out of the driver's seat. I'm driving to the hospital." And she's like, "You're bleeding. What are you talking about?" I said, "I've had many premonitions, but dying in a car accident wasn't one of them. So get out of the car before I kill you." So, because when a friend is driving you, they're more cautious.
Right.
And also, I live behind a totally different hospital. So if I called 911, they would take me to that hospital. And that wasn't the hospital I coordinated my health care with.
Right.
So I got to the hospital. I checked in. They triaged me. I get in. And, Jonathan is on Skype chat. And my doctor comes in and says, the OR is quiet right now. You're in a little distress. Why don't we go ahead and get Jacob out? And I knew at that moment that the time is up. So I started texting Jonathan and saying, he thought he was going to make it to the delivery. And I said, they want to go now. And I start writing, "You've made me the happiest woman in the world. Please love this child. Take care of this child, love him, take care of our children." And I started to just try and think about what else I could say for these last few moments. And my husband never gave it any hardcore emotional heaviness to it. All he said was like, "Where do I meet you?" And I said, 8th floor recovery, hopefully. And, that was it.
Can you talk us through that? Because, again, God willing, none of us are ever in that position where we know we're about to die. Mm-hmm. How are you not losing your mind?
Oh, no, I'm losing my mind. As soon as she told me that it was time to go to the OR, I knew that D-Day, my delivery day and my death day, was the moment I deliver this child. So keep the baby in me.
But you're keeping your mind. I mean, you're cleaning up your mess. You're driving yourself to the hospital. I would be bargaining, man. I'd be caulking myself closed and saying, "Not today, not today. This ain't happening."
Yeah, you don't have a choice, right? This is not my choice. it is this time. I mean, an anesthesiologist, I spoke at a legislative conference for the American Society of Anesthesiologists, and when I tell the story from a medical perspective and also from a patient advocacy perspective, I describe what happens and my feelings and the premonitions. And one anesthesiologist said to me, if you were my patient, I wouldn't have done the procedure because I believe in foreboding and I always stop everything. I said, yeah, but this baby was coming out no matter what. And he's like, yeah, good point.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So that anesthesiologist was basically admitting, I believe that you could maybe bring on this situation.
What he was saying is that there have been plenty of people that he's seen and experienced as an anesthesiologist where a patient would say, I have a bad feeling, and they stop an elective procedure. So many anesthesiologists will tell you that when they hear a patient talk about they're going to die, it's a big red flag, and they reassess things. They make sure that certain things, they double check, cross their T's, dot their I's, and listen carefully. A really good anesthesiologist and medical team will heed the warning.
All right. You're D-Day. You're going in. Again, I don't think any one of us could even imagine what this is like to be certain you're about to die. And like you said, there's nothing you can do to stop what's coming. What an absolutely horrific, what a horrific moment. I don't mean to stress you out, but holy cow.
You're bringing me, I know, but you're being so descriptive. I'm like, writing this book was so descriptive. And I'm like, I threw up so many times and everything. You're taking me right back to the freaking moment. Okay, fine. So yes, I look at my daughter and I kiss her a million times, and my doctor's like, okay, we're going to be back with your little brother and you'll see mommy in a little while. And I knew it was going to be the last time I would see her. I was so convinced of it that I just held on for a moment longer and had kept my stuff together until the gurney took me down the hall, and then I broke down crying. And I look at my doctor and I said, Julie, there's something wrong. You need to put me on general anesthesia. And she's like, Steph, I'm not going to put you on general anesthesia because we're going to put the baby to sleep and you need to relax. And so I said, at that point, I am getting ready to deliver. It's not like I can run down the hall and away from myself. So I get wheeled into the OR. They're preparing my belly. They're putting the curtain up in front of my face. They're talking to me. But at that point, when they started talking to me, they were talking to a body, because I don't remember much of anything other than telling people somebody needs to tell me a joke because it's really tense in here. And no one was laughing. And at that moment, there's a moment where they put soap on your belly and they have to wait 3 minutes and everybody's looking up at a clock. And when I tell you, like your example of the Grim Reaper pointing a gun at my head, that ticking of that freaking clock for 3 minutes, and that's all I am hearing, is the most silence that you could ever experience in that moment, because I know when they deliver this baby that's it. I know it. I know it with everything I have. So they cut my belly open. They get Jacob. I do not remember most of it.
Was there any negotiation going on at all? Are you crying out, either mentally or out loud to God, hey, take grandma. She's old anyway. Let me stay. Was there any kind of negotiation you're trying to make in this deal?
I was desperately in need of my husband's hand. I was wishing he was there just to tell me a story, just to get my mind off of it, because it was so heavy in that moment that it was cold. And if you've ever been in an operating room, it's just sterile. The smell is sterile. It's freezing cold. And the fear was so palpable that I needed a distraction. I needed like a marching band to come in and just completely distract me. And nobody was doing any of that. So I felt very alone in that moment.
Now, had you had any premonitions about that your husband wouldn't be there at that moment?
No, but you know what? I have to say God works in mysterious ways, because, he feels guilty to this day that he wasn't there present. I mean, he was a former Air Force pilot. So for him, in crisis mode, he's really excellent in crisis mode, but he feels really guilty he wasn't there, and he hears the stories about what happened next. But I said, it's one thing to hear about it. It's another thing to see it. So.
All right. So walk us through that now. They've opened you. They've delivered the baby.
And then seconds later, I'm dead.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and that's it for...
It's a wrap.
What? So you're dead. Now, do you remember... You said you don't really remember much of that going on, but do you remember the fade to black? Do you remember anything along those lines?
No, what I remember is completely separating from my body probably a couple of minutes before it happened. Like, just completely...
Okay, when you say separating from your body, out-of-body experience?
Yeah, what I learned later as I continue to tell you the story, it was verified and validated with what I saw, but I couldn't have told you then and there why I went ice cold. But there were plenty of doctors who said that they kept trying to talk to me before Jacob was delivered, and I wasn't responding at all. Like, they would be like, Mrs. Arnold, are you cold? Mrs. Arnold, do you need a blanket? Mrs. Arnold, I'm here to talk to you, Mrs. Arnold. And I was not saying one word.
And you're just down for the count. This is it. Now, this isn't just you were out of body for 37 seconds. You literally flatlined. They lost you. Now, I know... to be 100% honest, there's a lot of people out there going, whatever, 37 seconds. I've passed out and probably looked dead for 37 seconds. Right. That's no time at all. But the fact is, you foresaw how this whole thing was going to go down in every step of the way. And basically, in every step of the way, it happened exactly as you saw it go down.
Correct. So what ended up happening was I had a very rare pregnancy complication called an amniotic fluid embolism, which is a 1 in 40,000 risk where amniotic cells get into the mother's bloodstream. And if you happen to be allergic to it, your body goes into somewhat anaphylactic shock. And in most cases, you don't make it. If you're lucky enough to survive the first insult phase of an AFE, which is cardiac arrest, everything just going completely gone. Then you start phase 2, which is DIC, which is your body's inability to clot blood and you hemorrhage everywhere. Lucky for me, my flag was filed and there was a crash cart and extra blood in that operating room at their fingertips in order to get me back up incredibly fast and then to incorporate that extra blood. A normal operation, they probably have around 6 units of extra blood for an operation of this sort, like a C-section, 6 to 10 units. I was given 60 units, 60 units of O negative blood and blood products.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
All right. So, wow, that's a lot alone. And that's a rare blood type.
It is. And so I will tell you that my anesthesiologist, the one that flagged my file, happened to be in the OR at the time. There was an attending anesthesiologist who is now the section chief, the section head of Northwestern's anesthesia department. So there was no need for the fellow anesthesiologist who took the phone to be present, but she said she had a sinking feeling when my flag popped up, and she was there, and she went to the operating room before all of this happened, and she said she looked at the other anesthesiologist and said, I've got a bad feeling about this.
That's remarkable. All right, so now you've crashed out, you're gone 37 seconds, they fight to bring you back.
Correct. So just to people that have talked about the 37 seconds, just to get to that point, because you're absolutely right. I mean, one publisher that didn't take my book said, and I won't name the publisher, said, oh, she didn't die long enough to make it compelling. Now, and
you underachiever, you.
I really am. I said, so how long is long enough? What I understand from everybody who has studied clinical death, that there is no time and space in this other dimension. Mm-hmm. So whether it's 37 seconds or 37 hours or 37 minutes, the download of information you get within 37 seconds or 37 minutes, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I don't know what the capacity is for each individual, but there was a lot to download in that. And had they not resuscitated me and had the materials with them, and if I gave birth in any hospital that wasn't prepared like this, you and I wouldn't be talking. So they resuscitate me. Interestingly enough, and it's a very, I don't believe in coincidences just to get that out in the open. My husband says that is statistically impossible. I said, you can say whatever you want with your statistics, but I do not believe in coincidences. So these two anesthesiologists, 3 weeks before, and just so you know how rare an AFE is, 1 in 40,000 risk, Northwestern delivers 12,000 babies a year. every single doctor in my OR had never seen one in person, had never had a patient who had an AFE, and most of them had been working in that hospital for 25 years. Not most, like a couple of them have, and a lot of them have been in the industry for a very long time. And these two anesthesiologists, 3 weeks before my AFE, go to their conference, and in an abstract, not even their featured presenter, they go to an abstract to learn how to resuscitate an AFE patient within seconds using a completely new method neither one of them has ever heard of. And they used that method on me 3 weeks later.
Wow. Talk about everything aligning.
Yeah.
Just, wow.
Yeah. So I flatline. I go into DIC. They get me stable. They put this Bakri ball in me. They sew me up temporarily, and then they're preparing me to be in a medically induced coma to transfer me to the surgical ICU. And that's when my husband arrives. So he gets to the hospital and he texts my doctor, "How's everything going?" And she says, "The baby's fine and Stephanie's stable." And he's smart enough to know that's not good. So he gets to the labor and delivery floor, and she's got blood all over her scrubs. And she says, "The anesthesiologist is going to come in here in a minute to talk to you about everything. I got to get back to Stephanie." So anesthesiologist comes out, and lucky for this anesthesiologist, my husband was an Air Force pilot, because apparently anesthesiologists and Air Force pilots have the same way of thinking things through. And my husband goes into an autopilot mode, which is, what's the morbidity mortality rate? What do we need to do to get her to the next thing? She talked about all of these things. He was unemotional about anything. And at the end of the conversation, she said two things. She said, one, don't look up what an AFE is, which is really ridiculous because, of course, you're going to do that. And the second thing is, my husband said to her as she was walking out the door, if she needs a hysterectomy, this is the doctor we met with 2 months ago. So she took note of it. She said she's not stable enough to have any more surgeries, and I doubt she needs it. I think we have her somewhat stable. But she took note of it, and she left. Well, 7 hours later, he's sitting in the ICU with me, and the bells and whistles go off, and they realize that I'm still hemorrhaging, and they call in the gyn-onc I met with months before to come in and perform the hysterectomy. So they perform the hysterectomy, and then they do the pathology on the uterus, and they realize that an accreta had started to form. It was just microscopic and not picked up from the MRI.
Boom, mic drop. You nailed almost every aspect of this premonition-wise. When your husband realizes all of that, and everybody you've talked to about this for months, how are they treating you now on this side of the surgery? I mean, were they all like, wow, how did you, were they just astounded by this? I would have guessed medical science would want to put you in a pickle jar and start watching you.
So, I was in a medically induced coma. I had my kidneys failed, so I started dialysis. And we're Jewish, so we had a bris ready to happen 8 days after the birth of our child. So all of this is happening at the same time. I'm in a coma. Jonathan's like trying to figure out everything. Jonathan is on a whiteboard in my ICU, and he talks about this where he's just doing calculations. If it's a 1 in 40,000 risk, how many, 12,000 babies a year, and he's doing these formulas to try and make him feel some semblance of normalcy, right? And ultimately, when they brought me down off of the medication, they couldn't guarantee that there wasn't a neurological deficit, because most people that survive a catastrophic AFE that are not prepared for it, either, well, they don't survive, the baby doesn't survive, or the baby does survive, the mother could be in a permanent vegetative state. And there are many other versions of what this looks like. And so they were preparing him for the worst. And as they took me, they extubate me, and I looked down, and I was on dialysis, so I was still swollen, and down on my swollen belly. And the first thing I say is, am I still freaking pregnant? And, he started laughing, and everybody kind of chuckled, and he said he knew at that moment I was going to be okay. And so at that point, you're in a teaching hospital, right? And so we had every single department. I had cardiology, hematology, nephrology. I had pulmonology. I had every single department coming in with their residents talking to me and trying to figure out all of these things. And many saying, looking at me like I'm the Walking Dead, which was not comfortable, but at the same time saying, how did you know? And I said, I don't know, you should tell me. And then, I was like, I was right. And so, they really were incredible, and they took really great care of me, and I came out the other side of it. But physically, I was torn apart, mentally I was much worse. And so eventually when I got off dialysis and I was done with physical therapy and trying to heal from all the wounds, I went to, psychologists and asking them over and over again, like, how is it that I saw everything months before it happened? And they were like, let's not worry about that right now. Let's just worry about getting you out of the trauma.
In other words, we have no answers for this, so let's deflect if we can.
Well, that was a problem. I'd get very angry, and Jonathan's like, sweetheart, they're just trying to help. I said, yeah, this is not helping me. I said, because what happens in the event I have another premonition or I start freaking out over something else? I said, I can't handle this in my body right now. I need to understand it. I need an explanation for it. At one point, in getting full circle, what I told you in the beginning of the interview was, when, I thought I was willing it to happen, I went back, probably 9 months after I gave birth, just to thank everybody for saving my life. And I saw the guy knock, and, I asked him, I said, so what do you think happened? He's like, self-fulfilling prophecy. I said, now, by you saying that would mean that you're very spiritual. And he's like, well, I didn't say I believed it. It's just, a theory. It's just something we're throwing around. I said, you know what? It made me very upset, because I was already dealing with the fact of, did I will this to happen? Did I almost kill myself and take myself away from my family? Right. And I was having so much guilt about that. And then I kept thinking, I'm like, how could I will these organs to combine? How could I will a hysterectomy? How could I will the hemorrhage? How could I just started processing it. And because my doctors couldn't give me a medical reason, my one doctor who, is a professor at Northwestern, and she sits on the board of directors at the hospital. She's like, I can't give you a medical reason. I think you need to go spiritual on this one.
And now you literally travel and speak to medical professionals all the time. How do they react to this at this point? Are they open to the spiritual aspect of the story?
When I first started telling the story, I thought, why are these medical professionals asking me to tell the story? And people remember stories, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to tell the story. But my book has a very spiritual tone to it. But I will tell you, because of all the documentation around our story, and because a lot of these doctors know each other, and the hospital has a stellar reputation, it's not somebody saying something through hearsay. There was just so many witnesses around it that they're learning from it. And that is something I wouldn't have expected. When HarperCollins bought the rights, I think they thought it was going to compete with Heaven is for Real and Proof of Heaven and everything. And I go out of my way, and I had gone out of my way to not discuss all of the spiritual components that I could not prove. What I told in the book was everything that I could prove and was documentable. So for me, this was like crossing my T's, dotting my I's. And because my husband is who he is, it was more of this journey taking him from agnostic to believer, because he witnessed it all. So I was happy. So even though it was physically happening to me and I was being turned inside out, he is the most important person in my life. And to have the most important person in my life question the validity of something that's so personal, so deep, and so vulnerable, he needed to be on the same page. So if I needed to prove it just to him in order to have what I believed as my soulmate in this lifetime and the next lifetime, then that's what I was going to do.
Now it starts to get even more interesting. After months of recovery, you begin to remember details of this experience, details that you knew because, again, you witnessed this entire dramatic event, including your own death, from outside your body.
Yes. So
now, were there other spirits there with you?
Yes. So what ended up happening was I was on a talk show, and the host says to me, "Did you see the light?" And I said, "I don't know, man. They give me a lot of drugs, So
I saw all kinds of pretty lights, man.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So I said, "I don't know. I wasn't afraid to say there wasn't anything beyond this lifetime, but if there was there a way to find out?" So after getting my fill of enough therapists, I found a regression therapist that a friend of mine had recommended, and through hypnosis, and I videotaped my hypnosis. They use regression basically, and many people have heard about Dr. Brian Weiss, who's written a book about many lives, many masters, about past life regression. I was not interested in going into a past life because how can you prove it? How can you prove that you were a prostitute in a past life? Or why was I a princess in a past life? I'm like, that wasn't where I was going. What I wanted to remember was what happened in 37 seconds, what happened in the months before leading up to it, and what happened when I was in a coma. And I wasn't sure if it would be anything, but ultimately, after many hours of therapy, she gets me to the point in the operating room, and you can see it. There's a small clip of it on my website, and so when you see me convulse and go through the seizure, I start explaining everything that I see after I flatlined, from where the doctors were standing, that the first crash cart didn't work, that second crash cart did, that which doctor hit the button for the code, which nurse jumped on my chest to give me CPR, there were just many, what was happening down the hall, where the nurse's break room is, all this stuff. So, and the fact that I saw hundreds of spirits, people that I knew and people that I didn't know. And then I had my grandmother and my uncle in the operating room with me, and that there were certain messages that I was getting, realizing.
All right, can I stop you for one second? When you said you saw hundreds of other spirits.
Yeah.
Where?
So I didn't see God. There was a heavenly-like experience in a different dimension.
So it wasn't like you were thrown out of your body, standing there watching all of this unfold and realize that you're in a room full of dead people as well.
No. And in fact, when I see what
I got excited for a second simply because when I had a surgery a number of years ago, and we did a theater of the mind of this a while ago, I was dipping in and out of a very strange consciousness where when my eyes were open, I could see all of my living friends in the room, and when I would close my eyes, I could still see the room, but instead I could see dead people standing there. And I was kind of bridging this gap between two worlds where I could see the dead with my eyes closed, but I couldn't see them with my eyes open. And it was really one of the most seminal and bizarre experiences in my life. And I understand, I give in to the fact I was tripping out on morphine, but it's such a clear memory to me. How many times can you say you have a clear memory while on morphine?
No, you don't.
Right.
But people would say, well, the brain is playing tricks on you. And of course, when you're traumatized, you want your loved ones next to you.
Oh,
right?
These weren't loved ones. That's the weird part. It was a room full of strangers watching. It was bizarre.
So I can't tell you that in the regression therapy, because this is where I saw it, when you imagine, so what she did was she took me back to the room as an observer. So all of this was happening in real time, and I was watching it as another Stephanie standing perpendicular to the Stephanie on the operating table. And so what I was able to see it almost as a film strip, everything happening in real time. And, what I've learned is that the body and the cells in the body compartmentalize pain and trauma. So they're stored someplace. In the brain, those memories are stored someplace, but the drugs do a great job of packing them away so that you don't have to think about them ever again. But you definitely feel them in different places. So I was able to see, so I can't tell you 1,000% that closing my eyes, those hundreds of spirits wouldn't have been above the operating room, but it was just a heavenly place. So I saw clouds, and I never, whenever I see something now, I never see feet. I never look down because I know that.
Wait a minute, when you see something now, you continue to see dead people?
I do. Okay, that's...
Listen here. I do. That's got to make your husband really uncomfortable. First of all, you're never wrong, and you're surrounded by dead people. That's a lot of pressure in a marriage.
David, I've this is like the first time I think I've admitted to it on any kind of talk show or radio show, because it hasn't been a comfortable experience. And I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be a medium. I'm an accidental medium, if anything. And it's not organic. It's not, how do I say it's not organic? It's not that it happens every single time I see somebody. It happens. And I was at a concert. I went to a Phil Lesh concert the other day. And then, in the middle of the concert, I go to a complete stranger 200 feet away from me. I'm like, why did you try to commit suicide? And the man looks at me and falls to the floor and starts crying and lifts up his pant leg and shows me a prosthetic leg. And he said, how do you know this? He said, everybody thinks this is a farm accident, and in fact, I jumped in front of a train. And I said, I don't know how I know this, but for whatever reason, I'm supposed to say that. And I'm going to go back over here and shut up, because I'm a danger to society right now. I need to. I mean, the poor guy was probably stoned and listening to Phil Lesh, and he's like, why are you bothering me? And now I'm crying on the floor. And I'm like, I need to be quarantined. So I don't usually talk about it all the time I don't talk about it at all, because I'm still getting uneasy feelings about it. And what if I'm wrong? I don't want to, I don't want to.
I don't think you and the word wrong go hand in hand at all here.
I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, right. I don't want to, I know
it's a lot of pressure, right?
I don't feel comfortable in that part of the skin. And I don't want to be known for that. And especially, what's been happening. I'm really excited that from a medical community and from a patient advocacy perspective, it's like people are listening to the story and learning that the sixth sense is actually something real. Just because you can't categorize it in one of the five senses doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, and the doctors are starting to explain their own phenomenon that they experience, because it's a very safe place to do it in. So I don't really, I don't
really. Doctors are opening up to you about
they are
paranormal phenomena.
It's pretty phenomenal what's been happening, but I'll get to that in a second. So ultimately, unless you want me to shut up. So
I'll keep you on for another 3 hours. This is fascinating.
So ultimately, I saw a lot, and my husband, and the videos are quite graphic, and my husband says, how do you know this isn't a recalled episode of Grey's Anatomy in your head? And
because Patrick Dempsey didn't show up and kiss you halfway through, right?
Exactly. So I said, it's a fair point, right? And I call my therapist and I said, how do you know what I'm telling you is true? And she said, well, sometimes the only validation we get is the patient feels better. I said, you see, that's not good enough for me. I have witnesses. So I took the tapes back to the doctors who were present, and I showed them, and with tears in their eyes, they're like, how do you know all of this? None of this is in your medical files. How do you know this? And when I saw one nurse, she says to me, Mrs. Arnold, you probably don't remember me. I'm like, you're the nurse that jumped on my chest and broke my ribs. And she was so startled by that she went back to her office and she broke down crying.
Wow.
And then I go to my doctor, Julie. I said, did you keep saying this can't be happening, this can't be happening? And she said, I did, but in my head.
Oh, a new layer.
And then I said, because I told Jonathan, I said, Julie didn't deliver the baby. And he said, what are you talking about? I saw her when I arrived. She had blood all over her scrubs and everything. He's like, how do you know that? I said, because I saw it in my regression therapy. And he's like, okay, honey. All right, you have a good night now, and I'll see you later. And I said to Julie, did you deliver the baby? And she said, no. And I knew exactly who delivered the baby. I said, did this person deliver the baby? And she looks at me perplexed. She's like, I called her in 10 minutes before your procedure. How do you know that?
Please don't tell me it was cafeteria staff.
No, but you'll see how it twists and turns. Like, it was so serendipitous that
is amazing.
So at that point, I had all the information I needed. I will tell you that it hasn't been a comfortable ride. But what has happened is the skeptic and the agnostic and the medical community has connected with the story in a way I never would have thought possible. And I really have to say that I'm incredibly grateful to whatever forces have created this path, because being a former TV producer, I always made sure the facts were correct. And by doing that in this case and having the witnesses and having the doctors on tape and then validating at a very prestigious hospital and then following it along the way is what is separating this from a lot of other stories. But that doesn't mean that the other stories are any less truthful. It just has more documentation. So the clinicians and the patients can learn to speak up and believe that their senses and their intuition is real.
Stephanie, I've got a hard question for you now. Maybe it's not hard. Maybe it's easy.
Right.
You had this gift given to you, and if you woke up tomorrow and began seeing your death again, would you be more comfortable facing death, knowing that this will be it this time?
Yes.
And would you want? We have a lot of listeners who are intrigued by the fact of, I'd like to know when and how I'm going to go.
No, I don't think that. I'm just not afraid of death anymore. What I look at is that the soul lived before it entered your body and will live long after it leaves. So I no longer cry at funerals because of the things that I see and continue to see. There's this other dimension at work that, where other people, your listeners, many other millions of people have experienced and seen, and that I'm just realizing has always been there. It's just my eyes are a little more open than they had been.
And I know you're exploring more of the spirituality side of this as well. So I find this fascinating, and I'd like to throw out a theory to you, something that I've been talking about on the show for a couple of years now. And I don't know if this is something that's already, in your head or if having lived through this, you can maybe even dismiss this theory, and that's fine too. One thing I've noticed that in the 12 years since starting the show, my belief system in a lot of what we call the paranormal has changed radically. And that I don't necessarily believe we're being haunted by dead people in the true sense of the word, that they died and they left their body and they're hanging around.
Right.
I think sometimes we're running into shadows in time and space. And we as a being have consciousness, which cannot be measured in one location. Consciousness that just seems to, as you showed, can supersede the body and be outside of the body, witnessing everything that's taking place, as though you become a third-party participant in this entire event. So I believe that we time travel on a pretty regular basis. And in your case, you had such a traumatic experience and something so incredibly detailed happened to you, and you watched it and witnessed it, that I wonder if these premonitions came to you, because if our consciousness doesn't know time or space, we don't have those natural constraints. Were you telegraphing back to yourself in your own lifetime what was about to come? Not that you were making it happen, not that it was a negative, like you were bringing it onto yourself, like using The Secret, but that it was going to be there. And I mention that because I tell people, think how many times you've made a bad decision in your life, and you spend nights laying awake, commiserating about it and fantasizing about a different way and thinking about it. And then you reflect back and you think how loud that voice was that told you to go left instead of right that day.
Right.
And I think I heard you mention it on the other show today that, sometimes you get that feeling not to go down that road today, and you'll turn and you may never know what happened down that road today.
Right.
But there was something that veered you off topic. And I think we're doing that. I think that human potential is so much greater than we give ourselves credit for, especially in today's environment. But I think that we're in a sense sending telegraphed messages back, and it's how we start to understand those messages that we may be given multiple chances at one lifetime. We may be given the opportunity to set right what we once did wrong.
Right.
By giving us those reflections in time. And I'm just curious, as somebody who's lived and died and lived again through this, does that resonate at all with you, or do I just need to go see somebody in a nice white building with a wraparound jacket?
No, it absolutely resonates with me. I've been having conversations with like Dr. Larry Dosey, who wrote what was my Bible when I was recovering, called The Power of Premonitions, because he is an MD who talks about his patients who've had them. And I've spoken to astrophysicists and astronauts and theoretical physicists and scientists that are so much smarter than anything I could ever aspire to.
Name dropper.
And no, yeah, exactly. that I couldn't even imagine having these conversations. And they talk about consciousness. They talk about, that the mind being, being that spirit. It's just so heady for me. And I'm trying to dissect it, because understanding the quantum mechanics of it all and understanding entanglement and, it's really, really difficult to even understand 1 millisecond or 1 millimeter of that information. But I do think that you're on the right path. I do think that everything comes in a form of energy. So the spirit is energy, the body is energy, the mind is energy, our thoughts provide energy, our inertia moving forward is all energy, moving backwards is energy. So there's something to this. And I don't even admit that I understand any of it whatsoever. I'm just on this warpath, if you will, to try and nail down concretely what is spirit and what is science, so I can start pushing them into each category. But
maybe there isn't. Yeah, maybe there isn't a separation, and that's the problem.
That's the problem. And I think that problem or acceptance, right? Jonathan said to me once, he said, I've just accepted what's happened to you and everything that continues to happen to you as just, I've accepted it. And I said, well, how do you just accept it? He says, Stephanie, I've witnessed enough mathematicians trying to figure out one problem that will literally drive them insane. And I think people have been arguing this kind of conversation since the beginning of time. So you understanding what happened to you, I don't know whether you'll ever get an understanding of it, but at some point you just have to accept it. There was one point I was in LA and I had a meeting with a showrunner, and of course it's more comfortable for me to do TV than it is to write a book. And the showrunner had heard my story, and she said, Stephanie, I'm a skeptical person. Your story's fascinating, and it's not that I don't believe in intuition and people have intuition, but it's just never happened to me. And I said, okay. I said, but I'm not here to discuss that. I said, the evidence on my story speaks for itself. I'm here to pitch you a show. Now, this woman is very well known in the industry, so people would definitely know who she is. And I'm sitting with like 10 of her staff, and we're in the middle of the meeting, and all of a sudden, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And I know it's not mine. And I have two choices in this moment, is to say something or not say something. And I'm going to be the crazy lady in the corner and blow this pitch out the door. So I can't breathe, so I have no choice. So I stop everything and I say, I'm sorry. I need to acknowledge something. I said, somebody in this room had a family member who just had a male family member who just had a heart attack. And I said, who in here just had a family? And they're all like, no. The woman who owns the company says to me, my mother had a heart attack years ago, but she's fine. I said, that's not it. But as she's talking, it's getting stronger. So I know it's coming from her direction. So I said, okay, I've acknowledged it. Let's continue the pitch. So I finish the pitch and I walk out the front door and it releases. And my girlfriend who was in the meeting says to me, what's with the theatrics? I said, you know what? I don't know what to tell you. I just couldn't breathe, so I had no choice. I sense it, I say it, maybe that's a problem, right? So I get a phone call from the company, a few days later saying we figured out what the heart attack was from. And they said, well, she went back into her office and she got a phone call from her sister in New York who said her father had a heart attack at the moment you were feeling it.
Bam. Holy cow.
So
it is truly a gift and a curse all at once, isn't it?
Because at that moment, I'm like, what are you trying to tell me that somebody I just meet, I'm going to feel their father from 3,000 miles away? I'm like, so I call my husband and I said, can you believe this? He says, yeah, I actually can. I said, you know what? Screw you. So I'm like, I threw up because I which is why I kind of shy away from talking about it. And I don't know why I'm having this conversation with you, because this was like just a last minute conversation that we were going to have, but we're having it, getting me late at night. But it's not a comfortable place, but I have no choice but to acknowledge it and believe it. And so then the other people that have experienced it, personally, whether my story resonates with them, whether their own stories are validated in spite of it, because of it, if it gives them the courage to speak up a little bit different, then I'll continue to talk about it. But it's not comfortable.
Stephanie Arnold, you have 2 biological children, 1 stepchild. Have any of them started to show any signs that they may have these abilities?
That I'd rather not talk about.
Ooh, well, we'll get you back for the sequel book. We will wish you and your family continued health and success, and please stop thinking, stop having those nasty premonitions about yourself. We need you around for a good long time. You're doing good work. You're saving lives. You're opening the eyes of medical community to a different part of serving man, and that's an important lesson that I'm so glad there's somebody like you out there that's able to do this. And that you mentioned earlier how they were worried that, the other 2 books that had kind of come out and about near death, you might just be kind of a knockoff and a shade. Listen, 1 has already been completely debunked because the kid has come forward and said his father made up. Kevin Malarkey, I believe, is the author. His son has denounced the entire book and said it was nothing but a way to try to cash in on a tragedy. And the other one is, certainly stayed in there, but you, I think, have more credibility and you've certainly got a lot more, evidence, empirical evidence, which is what everybody asks for. Prove it. You've got the proof. You've got it all. That's amazing. And what a fantastic gift you've given to yourself, your family, and to the world. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Stephanie Arnold, you can find the book. Again, it's 37 seconds. You can check it out at darknessradio.com. Click on the Killer Links tab. And remember, you'll find all of the books and all the great product and swag from our guests right there, plus some cool stuff that Tim and I hand select for you. Everything from ghost hunting to Bigfoot hunting tools, cool clothes, all kinds of neat stuff. But you'll find all of the books from our authors that are available through Amazon.com right in that one place. So every episode, we've put that link up for you to find it and make it accessible. So remember, live life like this is your last day. Enjoy every minute, milk every second of it you can. Remember to love, laugh, and have as much fun as you possibly can, because we never know. We never know what's left to us. We don't all get the gift that our guest tonight got. So make sure that you make the best of the life that you've got. We'll be back again tomorrow with more of the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is Beyond the Darkness.